There is a shirt in a bag by your door right now with one thing wrong with it. A popped seam, a thumb-sized hole at the elbow. Everything else about it is fine, and it is going in the trash because fixing it feels like more trouble than the $15 it costs to replace. You would think a patched, mended garment is a weaker one, a step down from new. In the cold north of Japan, they proved the exact opposite for 300 years. A worn piece of cloth, stitched the right way, came back tougher than the day it was bought. It cost a needle and a spool of thread. And there is one thing about that stitching almost everyone gets backwards today. So let me stay on that shirt for a second because the shirt is the whole problem in miniature. One seam lets go along the shoulder. The fabric on either side of it is still good. The buttons are fine, the collar is fine, the color has not even faded. And yet the sensible move, the move every one of us has made, is to bag it up and buy another. A replacement shirt at a fast fashion store runs you $12, $15, maybe $20. Sitting down to fix the old one feels slower and harder and a little pointless. Why fight a needle for 20 minutes to save $15? That math is not an accident. It is the whole business you are standing inside of. A closet full of clothing that is cheap enough to throw away is a closet you will refill again and again, $40 or $50 at a time for the rest of your life. A company does not make its money when you keep a coat for 20 years. It makes its money when you replace that coat every second spring. A garment that is easy to repair is a customer it loses. A garment that is easier to bin than to mend is a customer it keeps. Nobody had to sit in a room and plan that. It arranges itself quietly every time you decide a small hole is not worth the trouble. The part worth getting a little annoyed about is this. The skill that lets you step out of that cycle is cheap, and it is not locked away in some workshop you will never see the inside of. It is a needle, a spool of cotton thread, and a scrap of old cloth you already own. Call it $3 or $4 of materials, most of which are sitting in a drawer in your kitchen. Set that against the running total of every shirt and every pair of jeans and every jacket you have thrown out over one small failure that a few minutes of work would have stopped. That is the exact trade the north of Japan made 3 centuries ago, and they made it in the other direction. They kept the cloth and they spent the thread. They also understood something we have managed to forget entirely, which is that a mend does not have to be a scar on a garment. Done the right way, the repaired spot is not the weak point you baby for the rest of the coat's life. It becomes the toughest part of the whole thing. Stronger where it's mended. That sounds like a tidy little saying until you see how it actually works under a needle, and then it stops sounding like a saying at all. This story does not begin in a landfill, though. It begins somewhere cold, in a corner of Japan where a length of cloth was worth more than the coins in your pocket, and where tossing out a torn coat would have been a little like tossing out food. Go to the very top of the main island of Japan, and you reach Aomori. It is a place of hard winters. Aomori City still holds the record as the snowiest prefectural capital in the whole country. Buried every year under a depth of snow most people would find hard to picture. Wind comes off the sea. The season for growing anything is short, and the season for simply surviving is long. For the farmers and fishermen who lived there a few hundred years ago, warmth was not a comfort. It was the thing that got you to spring. In my grandmother's house, a torn thing was never the end of the thing. A ripped knee, a worn cuff, a sock gone thin at the heel, none of it went in the bin. It went into a basket by her chair, and it came back out mended, and you wore it again without thinking twice. That was just the texture of the house. I did not know I was watching anything at the time. It was only years later, when the grown skeptic in me went looking for where that habit actually came from, that I ended up reading about the far north, and about people who took the very same idea and pushed it further than almost anywhere on Earth. Up in Aomori, cloth itself was scarce, and there was a reason for that scarcity most people never hear, and it is the point where this stops being a gentle old tradition and starts having a harder edge to it. Here is the detail that gets left out. For most of the Edo period, the long stretch of Japanese history running from the 1600s into the 1800s, cotton just did not reach ordinary people in the far north the way it reached the rest of the country. Part of that was the climate. Cotton is a warm weather crop, and it would not grow up there, so every scrap of it had to be hauled in from the warmer south, which made it expensive and scarce. Part of it was the rules. The sumptuary laws of the day held commoners to plain, coarse cloth and kept silk and the finer fabrics for the classes above them. And some of the northern domains held their poorest farmers tighter still, steering them toward hemp and away from what little cotton there was. However you weigh those causes in any one village, the outcome was the same. The poor of the north lived in hemp. Stiff, scratchy, loose-woven hemp, the kind of cloth that lets a winter wind pass straight through it. Sit with that for a second. The people who needed warm clothing the most were the ones kept furthest from it, by the cold ground they farmed and the little they had to spend. So when a scrap of cotton did make its way north, traded up from the warmer regions, it was treasure. You did not waste a thumb-sized piece of it. You saved it and you stitched it onto the worn hemp you already had, layer over layer, patch over patch, and you kept doing that for years, for decades, across a whole family. That is Boro. The word itself just means rags. For a long time, nobody thought of Boro as anything but poverty. It was embarrassing. It was the cloth of people who could not afford better, and once the country grew richer and cheap cotton finally arrived for everyone, families were glad to be rid of it. The old patched coats got thrown out or burned. They very nearly vanished from history altogether. They did not, and the reason they did not is essentially one man. His name was Chuzaburo Tanaka, born in Aomori in 1933. Starting in the 1960s, when almost nobody else cared, he walked the farming and fishing villages of the north and gathered up this ragged cloth by the armful because he could see what it really was. Over his life, he pulled together a collection of around 30,000 everyday objects. And here is the part that still gets me. Close to 800 pieces of that collection have since been formally designated by the Japanese government as protected cultural properties. Cast-off work clothes, patched and repatched by dirt-poor farmers, are now official national heritage, and a museum in the Asakusa district of Tokyo built an entire exhibit around them. The stitching on the finest of these even carries its own names. In one part of Aomori, it is called kogin, in another, hishizashi. Whole regional styles of reinforcing cloth, worked out and refined, and handed down by ordinary women over generations. This was never a lost secret hidden in a temple somewhere. It was a plain, living skill right up until the moment we decided we did not need it anymore. So let me show you what we actually threw away, because once you understand how that stitching works, the whole thing looks different. Start with an ordinary seam, the kind holding your shirt together right now. It is a single line of thread. All the stress of wearing that shirt, every reach and pull and stretch, runs along that one line, which means the shirt has exactly one line of failure. When a seam goes, it goes there, because that is where all the load was gathered in the first place. Now picture the opposite approach. Instead of one line of thread doing all the work, you lay down rows and rows of small running stitches across the whole area, a grid of them, hundreds of little anchor points holding the cloth. When force hits that cloth now, it does not pile onto one seam. It spreads out across the entire grid, shared between hundreds of stitches. So no single one ever carries enough to fail. It is the difference between hanging a heavy winter coat from one nail and spreading its weight across a whole wall of small tacks. Pull on the one nail and it rips out of the plaster. Pull on the wall of tacks and nothing moves. That is the first thing Sashiko is doing, and it is pure mechanics. The second thing is about thickness. Boro was never one layer of cloth. It was many layers, and often a little loose plant fiber or a worn-out rag was tucked between them as padding, all of it held together by the stitching. That did two jobs at once. It trapped pockets of still air between the layers, which is exactly how any warm garment holds heat, and it gave the needle far more material to bite into. And here is the honest version of what happens next, because you will hear people say the cloth felts together into a single piece, and cotton does not really do that the way wool does. What actually happens is sturdier and simpler than felting. The dense grid of stitching locks the layers to each other at hundreds of separate points. And as the cotton gets washed and worn over the years, it tightens and compacts around all of those stitches. So the whole stack settles into one thick, stable panel that moves as a single piece. The garment is not just patched and left delicate. It gets steadier and tougher the more it is used, which is close to the exact reverse of everything hanging in your closet right now. Subscribe if you want the next one of these to find you before you need it. Every video is one old method and one modern cost it quietly cancels, and there are a lot more of them than you would guess. So back to that shirt in the bag, because knowing why it works is one thing and doing it is another, and you can do this one yourself this week with almost nothing. Start with a patch of natural fiber cloth, cotton or linen, or a square of old denim, cut a little larger than the worn spot, and lay it under the hole or over the top of it, whichever you like the look of. Take a long needle and a length of thick cotton thread, real Sashiko thread if you can find it, ordinary strong cotton thread if you cannot. Mark a simple grid of straight lines across the patch, lightly in chalk or a washable pencil. Then you stitch, and the way you stitch is those little stabs the name refers to. You do not push the needle through and pull the thread for every single stitch. You rock the needle through the cloth and load several stitches onto it at once, 3, 4, 5 of them, then pull the whole run of thread through in one motion. That is what makes it fast, and it is how a farmer's wife could work her way across a whole coat over a couple of lamp-lit winter nights. Keep each top stitch a touch longer than the little gap beneath it. Keep them even, and where two lines of stitching would cross, let them meet at the gaps instead of stacking on top of each other. Cover the worn area and a good margin of healthy cloth all the way around it, so the load carries out into sound fabric and not just into the part that already gave way. Now you could do every bit of that correctly and still end up with a repair that fails in a season because of one move. It sounds like the smallest thing in the world. It is the whole difference. When people sit down to fix cloth, they pull the thread tight. It feels right. Tight feels strong. Tight feels secure. And it is exactly wrong. When you haul each stitch tight, two things happen. The cloth puckers and bunches, which you notice right away, and the thread loses all of its give, which you do not notice until later, when the garment bends as you move, and that taut thread has nowhere to go, so it saws against the fibers until either the thread snaps or the cloth splits along the line of stitching. A tight mend is a mend at war with the garment it is trying to save. The old way does the reverse. You keep the thread relaxed, you let it lie against the cloth without straining it, and you leave a little slack on the back and at every corner. After each run of stitches, you pinch the fabric and smooth it flat with your thumb so it settles natural and easy. The finished mend can move. When the cloth flexes, the mend flexes right along with it, and nothing ever pulls hard enough to tear. You would think someone would have told you that on day one, and almost nobody does. That one habit is the entire gap between a repair that lasts 40 years and one that lasts 40 days. And it is the honest reason that little line from earlier is not just a nice sentiment. Stronger where it's mended. A loose, even grid that moves with the cloth will genuinely outlast the plain fabric around it. The mend becomes the last part of the whole garment to die. Now, I want to be straight with you about what this will not do, because that honesty is the whole point of this channel, and it is exactly the part the fashion version leaves out. This is slow. A proper mend is an evening with a needle, not a 10-second fix on your way out the door. If what you want is your clothing repaired instantly and invisibly, this is not that, and it never was. It asks for a little patience, and some people simply will not enjoy it. It also has real limits in what it can save. Sashiko loves natural fibers: cotton, linen, hemp, wool, a good pair of denim jeans. All of it takes the needle and holds the stitch. What it does not love is modern synthetics. A slick, stretchy polyester shirt will not grip the thread the same way, and a cheap blended garment that has already worn through to almost nothing gives you nothing to anchor into. I am not going to promise you that a grid of stitches raises the dead. If the cloth is genuinely rotted to dust, it is done. This skill saves what still has some structure left in it. It reinforces, it patches, it extends the life of a thing. It does not perform miracles, and anyone telling you otherwise is selling something. And that word selling is where this whole thing turns. Everything in your closet was built to work against you keeping it, not by a villain in a boardroom plotting your downfall. Nothing that dramatic. It is simpler and colder than that. There is no product to sell you in a skill that makes you buy less. A company cannot patent "leave the thread loose and fix it yourself." There is no monthly charge on a coat you keep for 30 years, so the market does the only thing it can with a free skill. It sells you the look of it instead. And once you see this, you will see it everywhere. The Boro aesthetic, the patched, faded, visibly mended look that poor farmers wore out of pure necessity, is now fashionable. Back in 2013, the fashion house Louis Vuitton put Boro-style patchwork on a Paris runway. Designers stitch decorative fake patches onto jeans that sell for $300. The ragged look of people who could not afford new cloth is now a luxury item. And no, I am not making that up. We kept the appearance of the mend, and we threw away the skill that made it. The skill was the free part. So here is what I would actually do with all of this. In Tanaka's collection, there are garments with cloth in them that runs from the early 1800s all the way to the 1950s. A single coat, worn and patched and repatched across several generations of the same family, until the thing on someone's back was not a copy of their great-grandmother's coat. It was their great-grandmother's coat, with her stitches still in it and their own row added underneath. There is even a cloth up there called a bodoko, what they called a birth cloth, a plain sheet a family kept and handed down, and that a mother would lay out to give birth on. The same fabric holding a family's whole life in its layers. That is what a mend really is. It is not a repair. It is a way of keeping something long enough to hand it to someone else. So I'm going to ask you one thing, and I would genuinely love to read the answers. Tell me the oldest piece of clothing you still wear, and whether anyone ever taught you to mend, or whether that chain broke somewhere in your family the way it broke in most of ours. If you want to help pull that skill back, subscribe, because there are a lot of us relearning the plain, practical things our grandparents simply knew, and it goes better done together. Next time I want to show you the other side of this same cloth, A single square of fabric that a Japanese household used to replace every plastic bag and roll of wrap in the house for the price of the cloth and nothing ever again. Same few dollar logic, same old good sense. But for tonight, go pull that shirt back out of the bag, lay a loose, even grid of stitches across the tear, and remember that cloth, like most things worth keeping, comes back stronger where it's mended.